It wasn't that long ago that Bob Iger got his way and prevented Nelson Peltz on getting not only one but two board seats in a proxy fight. And at that time, the stock price was climbing up as there were a lot of announcements about things coming for the Disney company. Well, since then, the stock price hasn't been the best as of late, but since then, there's been a lot of heat coming at Disney's way, including a lot of criticizing and scrutiny of the theme parks. And the stock price has sort of reflected that as it is now currently under $100 and is maybe as of today looking to maybe break downwards under $90. And we actually have a headline here from Deadline that talks about one of the largest stakeholders in the company sold its entire share. And we're going to go through this article and talk about what this could mean for the stock and also the company, as they are beholden to that stock price in many ways. So, hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic. And like I said, here we have an article from Deadline. It says Ike Perlmutter has sold his entire stake. So Ike Perlmutter was the head of Marvel Studios whenever Disney bought it, and he was eventually pushed out, basically by Bob Iger and Kevin Feige. But the article, we'll go through this, and then there's another article as well that also talks about this. So there's a lot of places starting to really get on this subject. It says Ike Perlmutter, a major Disney stockholder who lent his shares to support a shakeup on the company's board, has now sold all of them and is moving on, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. When reached through a spokesperson, Perlmutter, who accumulated the holding when he sold Marvel to Disney in 2009 for more than $4 billion, didn't disavow this. Perlmutter had supported Nelson Peltz in a first run at a Disney board seat in 2022, although the activist investor ultimately backed down as Disney began to restructure, but saying he was ultimately unsatisfied by the turnaround efforts and worried about secession. Peltz started his campaign again, seeing it through the second time to a bitter proxy fight that ultimately lost this spring. The former Marvel executive and ultimately fired by Disney after Bob Iger returned as CEO, said, quote, Ike and Nelson were working together to try and encourage the board or convince the board to put Nelson on the board, Iger said. They have a relationship that dates back quite some time. We bought Marvel in 2009. I promised Ike the job that he would continue to run Marvel after that, not forever necessarily. In the second round, Perlmutter gave Peltz authorization to vote his shares as a billionaire founder and CEO of Trian Partners, as for one himself and another for the former Disney executive Jay Rasulo, meaning Disney shareholders would have had to eject two board candidates backed by the company. Not necessarily at that time, Disney had installed two candidates to basically try and preemptively prevent these two from getting on, so it wasn't necessarily the case. But there was a lot of wranglings on the corporate end of things. Perlmutter sold his entire position of 25.6 million shares in the months after the vote, said the Wall Street Journal, citing communications with an investment advisor seen by the publication. Specifically, he sold his stake between early April and mid July at an average price of just under $115. In a parting dig, he told the publication it's because he doesn't have confidence in management, and he said that he might be a buyer again if it falls to $65 or $75. Disney stock is trading down about 3% today at $91. It's been as high as $124 and as low as $79 over the past year. So Perlmutter selling his stake, while not surprising, is obviously not a good sign for Disney in terms of one of your biggest shareholders selling, even though it was a contentious shareholder in the eyes of Bob Iger and probably the board. But there's also another interesting article as well. This one I found over at Microsoft Start by Steve Anderson. It says Disney faces declining park attendance and shares slide. And it goes on to saying there was once a time in the United States when a trip to Disneyland was part of the summer vacation standard, but those times are increasingly changing, and many today despair of the chance to ever return. And that's not helping Disney shares, down over 2% in the closing minutes of Monday's trading. The price of a Disney experience these days is, for a lot of families out there, downright impossible to fit into a budget. So Disney, facing a decline in park attendance, is working to turn things around because a couple of dozen super wealthy people a day do not make for a working theme park. It's very true. Disney is paring back hotel rates, offering summer dining plans, and even lowering ticket prices on some of its parks in a bid to draw regular people back to the park. Given that the prices of a one-day park hopper ticket has risen as high as $254 per day, it was clear something needed to be done. The discounted ticket is $154, but only allows access to Hollywood Studios, Animal Kingdom, and Epcot. Adding actual Disney World to that will run. Adding actual, I think what they mean is Magic Kingdom to that will run another $109 per day minimum, which makes it higher. And they go on to talk about fixing the wrong problem here. While families are left with a terrible choice of seeing Disney for a couple of days or buying an entire television, Disney has announced that the animatronic character Liver Lips McGrowl is no longer a part of the Country Bear Jamboree. A recently concluded 7-month refurbishing effort saw the character removed as his name was considered derogatory to alcoholics. Meanwhile, Disney is facing a potential strike as several Disney unions representing over 14,000 workers authorized the strike and are ready to walk out. If a strike does take place, it would be the first in over 40 years. The strike is calling particular attention to labor practices as workers say they're subject to intimidating, surveilling, and unlawfully disciplining members. However, a strike could be averted through negotiation. So since then, it is reported by Scott Gustin that Disneyland Resort confirms that they have reached a tentative agreement with about this potential strike at Disneyland, which I think has been affecting the stock. And the reason it's been affecting the stock is because the parks make up for over 70% of the revenue now. So it's kind of telling, and we can take a look at the stock price right now. And it's important when you're talking about the stock price that many times there's just a down day in the market, and that will drag basically all stocks down. But if we look at this chart here, we can see in the green, this is the Disney stock, and in the orange, this is basically this is the SPY or SPY, which represents the S&P 500, which basically is a representation of the entire market. And you can see here since about mid-May, and really, if you zoom out further, I mean, Disney, this is a 5-year look here. Disney has underperformed the stock market for a long time, but going on almost 4 years now. But if we look at just the last 6 months, they have underperformed the market, which means that the market isn't just pulling Disney stock down. Investors are not looking favorably at the Disney stock. And again, this is not financial advice. I'm just somebody talking into a computer here, but for a lot of reasons, one being, especially right now, attendance to the parks is down for a multitude of reasons. I think part of it is the economy, but a lot of it is just there's a lot of resentment out there currently in the way that Disney has been handling the parks in terms of they've been, now that they're charging for essentially what Fast Pass Plus was, which was free, they're now charging for. The price is going up. We talked about another story how inflation, I believe, is around 15% in terms of the food. Disney is double inflation on their food prices, and it just increased competition with Disney. Disney, for the longest time, owned the theme park realm. They really had no competition. Now we're seeing competition, obviously, from Universal Studios with Epic Universe coming. Not only with Epic Universe coming, but we've seen competition from Universal over the past decade, ever since Comcast bought them with the Wizarding World and other attractions that have been drawing crowds to them. And especially since COVID, given it was a lot easier to go to Universal, you didn't have to deal with the park reservation system and all these other, it wasn't as complicated. And Disney has increasingly become more complicated. But now you got Epic Universe around the corner, which in my theory has been that, Epic Universe could be, it's affecting the current attendance over at Universal Studios because I think a lot of people are waiting to go over there until it opens. But I also think it could be affecting Disney, and a lot of people are just putting off entire trips to Orlando, waiting for Epic Universe, potentially choosing Epic Universe and Universal Studios over Disney, which would be a first because usually people would go to Disney and add on a Universal trip. So there's a lot of things affecting Disney. We're even seeing the stock going down. Currently, I think it's still at about $90, but I wouldn't be surprised if it closes below $90, even with Inside Out 2 becoming the highest grossing animated movie of all time, as well as seeing, Deadpool and Wolverine as having massive early ticket sales. That probably, I would not be surprised if it makes $1 billion as well. But the movies and the shows make, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the theme parks now. And since we're seeing all this turmoil in the theme parks, and especially you look at Disneyland and Disney World, I think that's the reason you're seeing the stock price pull down. And we'll have to see what happens with the stock as D23 is coming up in August. And we're assuming that Disney's going to have some pretty major announcements. But I am curious to see how, if they have major announcements, how does that affect the stock price? How do investors look at that? Because if they don't, if they're right now, they're selling on the news of Inside Out 2 making, being the largest animated movie. They're currently selling on Deadpool and Wolverine, preemptively. That's going to make a lot of money. So will they buy based on what is going to come to the parks? And I could see maybe not being the case because, again, whatever they do announce is going to take 3 to 5 years before that even would make its way into the parks where people could visit it. So you very well could see a scenario here where the Disney stock continues to go down, because I don't really see what the catalyst would be in the short term or really in the next 1 to 2 years that would really drive it up. And again, with the increased competition, not only just with Universal Studios, but regional theme parks that are popping up all over the place, that will affect Disney World's travel and just the general economy. People don't have the discretionary income to really go to theme parks right now. And because of that, that obviously is affecting Disney as well. So it's almost a perfect storm of the price continues to go down, and what was, they were making a lot of money in the parks, and that's still the biggest moneymaker. But there are so many, I guess you could just say, dark clouds or looming things about the parks right now. And there's a lot of scrutiny on the parks. I could pull up 2 or 3 other articles. There's another one from Motley Fool. There's a lot of articles by mainstream outlets talking about this. And, if you're a Disney investor, obviously at the high of $124 down, to around 90 now. We've seen it again, like they said in the article, go down to in the 70s. That does set up the scenarios as well, where if it continues to drop, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another proxy battle pop up, because Nelson Peltz did say that they would be watching. So if that price continues to go down in the stock, I'm not going to be surprised at all if Nelson Peltz re-enters the scene for another proxy battle, and we'll have to see if he would get it a third time. But, obviously, the cheaper a price on a stock it gets, the more turmoil that could mean for, Bob Iger. There's a lot of pressure because, that's something that these major corporations are basically, they're tied to their stock. And anytime it drops down, that creates a lot of issues for them. And currently, the overall stock market has been low the last few days. We'll have to see if the Disney stock rebounds with it. But again, they definitely don't like that stock being under $100, and even getting below $90. You could see it really take a dip. But with the amount of focus we've seen on, not only the stock price in the last few days, the Wall Street Journal having their articles and major outlets having theirs, it'll be interesting to see how this reacts. And I can't remember the last time I've seen this much sort of, even a lot of the Disney fans are jumping onto this, talking about, some of the disappointments with the parks. And I think a lot of this is, the switch over from Genie Plus to Lightning Lane has a lot of people, weirdly enough, they're not liking it as much, because basically it was Fast Pass Plus, but now they're paying for it, and it reminds people that it used to be free. And again, you've got Universal Studios probably within the next month announcing when Epic Universe is going to open, and presumably that is going to bring in massive crowds. And seeing how that could affect Disney next summer will be quite telling. If Universal sees a massive influx of people and Disney, does not, because I think Disney is thinking, okay, a lot of people are going to come into Orlando for Epic Universe. We're going to get some of those crowds as well. They could, but the other way could happen as well, because again, Universal is trying to get people to choose them over Disney and stay 3, 4, 5 days. Whereas used to, people just sort of tagged on a Universal Studios vacation to a Disney one, and they may be switching, and you're even seeing Disney centered accounts. This is on Disney Glimpses on Twitter saying, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually think Universal has a real shot at flipping the tables here. Disney's understanding of the guest is so far removed from what it was just 10 years ago that I all continue to long for will never return. The decisions surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic continue to plague this company, and they simply cannot get out of their own way. And I think this is the sentiment a lot of people have. Now, whether or not the current management is going to be, responsive, so far they haven't been. They did change the paid, basically fast pass system. So we'll have to see if they do respond to this. But as of right now, there's a lot of sentiment out there. The stock price isn't looking great, and we'll have to see what the next few months hold, especially with Epic Universe just right around the corner. Given, unless there was some major announcements coming out of D23, and that could happen, just to be fair to it. But that's going to do it for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture news around here. And let us know in the comments what you think all this potentially is going to see a rebound on things from their D23 announcements, or do you think this is going to be just a slow slip as a lot of more competition steps up for them? So, and until next time, we will see you in the parks.